Hello there, Padmapriya from Herons-Bonsai here. It's potting season again on herons, so it's about the end of February, beginning of March. So we thought we'd put together a quick video for some people that are attending a workshop here. And this is sort of more a memory jog for them because there's quite a lot that you could cram into a quick workshop on repotting. So the video is really as an aid memoir for those people, but we thought it might be interesting for other people to see as well. So repotting is quite a vast subject. It varies from species to species, so there's quite a lot that could go into this, but I'm just going to try and cover some of the basics and fundamentals as I see it from what I've learned as I've been on the nursery over the last 7 years or so. So with repotting, the areas that we're going to go through are going to be soil types, soil mixes, the reasons why we use different soil mixes. So that's probably the primary part of our workshop. We'll also be going through the tools that may be useful for you to use. So we'll be covering tools. We'll also be talking about pots, which pots to use and how to use them, whether to use ceramics, whether to use micas, whether to use plastic pots and so on. We'll also be talking about the most important thing probably is when to repot and why to repot. And then we'll be talking about the aesthetics of repotting. So those are the areas that I'm hoping to cover in the workshop, and hopefully this video, as I say, will act as an aid memoir for them. So one of the questions we quite often get asked at Herons is, when's the best time to repot? When should I repot? So let's start there. With regard to repotting, there's primarily two reasons why you would want to repot your trees. One will be from an aesthetics point of view, so from your styling point. So if you're trying to maybe put a bigger tree into a smaller pot, or if you're changing its orientation, you'll be looking at repotting within that context. And the other is about the health of the tree. So quite simply, what we're looking at when we're looking to repot trees is just to check to make sure that they are basically getting the most amount of care that they can get. So seeing as we're going to be dealing with aesthetics a little bit later when we're actually doing the repotting of a couple of trees, I thought I'd start with health of trees. So basically what we're looking at is the root structure and whether the root system has still got enough room within the pot to grow healthily. So personally, what I tend to do with trees that I'm working on at home is I take the tree out of the pot each year and just check the tree. I smell it, I look at the condition of the roots, and I'm looking for things like the smell of rotting roots. Obviously it's not a good thing, so that would suggest that we need to repot or probably put it into a better soil mix. If the tree is actually starting to lift itself out the pot where there is so much root mass that the whole thing is starting to lift out of the pot, that's obviously another good reason to repot. Obviously, the whole point of bonsai is to keep the trees as small as possible, so repotting from that perspective is obviously quite important as well. So essentially, what I look for is if the roots are so tightly packed, they are no longer able to pick up oxygen, water and nutrients from the soil mix that they're in. So those are the reasons, as I see it, why you would want to repot. I'm sure there's probably others as well, but those are the ones that we're probably going to cover in the workshop. So soil mixes, that's the next area that we'll be looking at. Different soils mixes are used for different trees, but essentially the way I look at it is that there is a balance between water retention and nutrient retention and drainage. So we're playing with those sorts of elements, and different mixes are used for different things. There are also a few things like hygge, for example, which actually is used at the base of big trees where the roots are likely to be compressed. So there are some structural aggregates as well. But the primary ones that you'll come across will be akadama, a traditional clay, fired clay that is imported for us from Japan. So in Japan they quite often plant their trees neat in this, but quite often they'll also mix it with two other things, which would be pumice and also volcanic grit, volcanic rock. So those are the sort of three constituents of the soil that you'll get in most Japanese potted trees. But because we're in the UK, our needs are different. So we also use a compost, which is essentially a very fine bark mix. And it will be different ratios of these things. And the final soil that you might come across is what's called kanuma. And kanuma is pretty much, as you can see from the picture on here, a soil type that we use almost exclusively with azaleas. So those will be the soils that we'll be covering in the course. So, next we'll be looking at tools. Your best friend when you're repotting is probably a sieve to sieve your aggregates. So sieves are very, very useful. Root hooks, sickles, very, very useful for getting trees out of the pot, particularly when they're pot bound. Root pruning scissors, chopsticks, rakes, and little pots for backfilling with soil. So those will be the main items that we'll cover, and we'll be using those when we do the actual demonstration, just to show you their usage. So next is pots. We'll be looking at various different types of pots and what they can offer you from the point of view of enhancing your bonsai. So there's a variety of different pots, variety of different makes, comes from different countries. So this one is a very nice Japanese pot, very good glaze, quite thin walls, quite a lot lighter than the equivalents that would come from China, for example. This one is a pot that's come from China, so thicker walled, quite a lot heavier. And then we've also got mica pots as well, which are a type of plastic, but pretty much indestructible. And then finally we've got a range of training pots, which are just straightforward plastic pots. So each aspect of a pot can enhance different aspects of your tree. So colour is very important. If you've got a tree that has a very nice foliage, you might want to enhance that. So using a glazed pot that's coloured would be very, very helpful. If you've got a tree and you don't want to detract too much from the actual tree itself, because it's very, very good quality, you'll probably use an unglazed pot. So there are also pots with designs on them. So again, you can use this to enhance your tree. And then you've also got the training pots that you're just growing trees on in until such time that you can get them into a nicer pot. Even things like the lips on the pot can have an effect on the way a person perceives a tree. So if you imagine a dado rail in a Victorian house, or a picture rail in a house, they're horizontal lines and they're used to shrink the height of the room. So in a Victorian house in the UK, you might have an 18-foot ceiling. If you walked into it, it would look very, very tall and not very cosy. So what they do is they put dado rails down, picture rails down, and they shrink the height of the room. And that has a similar effect when you're using a horizontal line on a pot. So this has got one on the lip. This one's actually got one on the lip and also one halfway down the pot. So this will have the effect of tricking the eye into shrinking the subject that you've got. Also, the angle of the pots is important. If you've got angles, if you've got a flared pot that goes out at an angle, sort of like this, maybe more than this even maybe, then what that will do is it will tend to emphasise the width of the tree. So you can trick the eye into making the tree look a lot wider than it is by using a pot that has got slanting sides on it. So each pot will have its merits, and each pot will bring out different aspects of your bonsai tree. You could talk forever about the different designs, but really the best way to find out which tree looks best in which pot is actually just to try them out. So we encourage people at Herons to bring a tree that they want to repot and just try it out in a few pots. And if it looks right to you, then it probably is right, yeah? So everybody in art will have their own view on what is the best aspect of the tree, and it's down to the individual to choose which way or which aspect of the tree they decide to emphasise. So these are my tools, so not as clean or as probably as nice as the ones you just saw that are available from our shop, but exactly the same tools here. So I'm going to be using those just to demonstrate repotting this DeSojo maple. So this one came in from Japan, I think last year. It has come in the Akadama that it originally came in. So this is just pure neat Akadama at the moment. So we normally try to get them out of the Akadama as quick as possible, but there's so many trees on the nursery, it's not always easy to do that. But this is the one I think we're going to repot. One of the reasons why I picked this up is one of the good indications that your tree needs repotting is that you can see the roots are starting to grow out of the base of your pot. So that's usually an indication that you may have a tree that needs to be repotted. So what we'll do now is we'll just take this out of its pot. So I'm just going to cut the wire that's holding the tree in and lift it out of its pot. And there you can see this almost certainly is a tree that we would be looking to repot. Okay, lots and lots of fibrous roots. It's very healthy. It doesn't smell rotten or anything like that at all, so all in good condition. I'm not particularly concerned about anything there, other than the fact that it probably just is time to repot this tree. So if this tree had been particularly tight in there, which does happen, or if you've got a pot that curves in or bellies out, then your little root hook is a really good way of cutting through some of those finer roots on the outside of your pot. So that is what you're using your sickle for. So the sickle would be just to loosen those roots so that you can get it out without having to damage your pot in any way. Okay, but on this occasion we didn't need that, so that's all good. So I'm probably going to put this straight back into this pot, but we'll pop it to one side for the moment. So the first thing you want to do when you're repotting a tree is that you want to start from the middle of the underside, and you want to start teasing out your roots towards the edge. So you're starting from the middle, working your way out. The reason for this is that, at least in Japan anyway, the ideal nabari is considered to be equally distanced radial roots, all going out in that sort of pattern. So you'll want to be raking your roots into that pattern, so as they fatten up over the years, they're all going to be in the right position. So that's not only true on the top, it's also true on the bottom, because some of these roots over time might end up being the roots that actually end up coming to the surface. So what you want to do is you want to take your root hook. I'm just going to swap sides because I'm right-handed. So take your root hook from the middle and just start teasing out gently. So you want to try and get a fair amount of this soil out. Some people will take all the soil out. Some people will leave quite a lot on there. I probably go for something in between the two. But basically you want to start raking those roots out towards the side. Okay, so I'm going to do that, and I'll come back to you when we've got something else to add. So you can see I'm almost there. I've sort of gone round the whole tree, teasing out the roots into that radial orientation. I'm now going to work on the top, and I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm just turning the tree towards me so that I'm always pulling towards me, and just gradually pulling all of those roots. So if I had a root that was here and I pulled it from here, I'd obviously be wrapping it round the tree. That's called girdling, which is something that A, doesn't look particularly nice, and B, isn't particularly healthy for the tree. I mean, ultimately it could, if it was left to go silly, it could actually even end up strangling the tree. So it's quite important not to have girdling roots. So all I'm doing is exactly the same as I did on the bottom, just teasing those roots out in a radial fashion. So you can use a root hook, you can also use a chopstick. Chopsticks are very handy for getting in and just loosening up the soil. Very soft and gentle way of separating the roots out from the soil. So I'm a big fan of the chopstick. Not everybody is, but I am. I quite like them. So you can do that, but you can also use these root hooks as well. Sorry, root rakes. This also comes with a little spatula on the end of it, which again, if this had been jammed into the pot good and proper, you can use this to lever your tree out of the pot. So quite a handy tool. I must be honest, I don't use it very often, but it is quite handy. So just bringing, and as I'm going, I'm also looking for any major roots that I might want to move. So this one here you can see is coming straight towards me, but would actually be much better if its orientation was out in this direction. So I'm going to free that root up, hopefully not losing the fine root, which is the feeding, and then I can take this root and then I can position it where I think it needs to go. So I'll probably put it in something like that. So I'm also uncovering some of the bigger roots as I'm going. I'm just working between the different tools, whichever makes the job most simple. So hopefully you can see on the camera that I've now teased out these roots in that radial fashion I was talking about. And now we're going to look at trimming some of these roots. So similar to pruning the crown of the tree, if you prune the roots, then they will tend to put out more new roots. And what we're looking for is all these nice fine roots, because those are the feeder roots. Those are the ones that we want to be really healthy, because that's what's supporting the tree whilst it's in a small pot. So if you've got any similar with pruning the crown of the tree, if you've got any roots that are poking straight up, now's an opportunity to just snip those out. Now this tree doesn't have many of those, but there's a few here that maybe need to come out. So just a couple. So this one's pretty good. Similarly with the roots on the underside, anything going straight down, you want to be removing those as well. We haven't got any on this one because these have been repotted quite regularly by looks of things. But if you had, obviously with the taproot, you would have removed that already. But if you have any other roots that are growing down, you can get rid of those, or you can put them into the orientation that you want. But basically any big roots that I don't really need, I'll probably just snip out of here, just leaving those smaller, finer roots. So now with different species of tree, you can safely remove a varying amount of root without causing too much stress to the tree. but it is species dependent. So I'm not going to say that you should do it all at 30% of the root mass or 40% or 50%. You're going to need to look up the individual trees and see what amount of root you can take off safely without stressing the tree out too much. I haven't ever seen anybody say that you can take out less than 30%. So generally, if I'm a bit unsure, I think in the terms of, well, 30% is okay, I might be able to take 50% out, but I'm going to stick to 30% anyway, because I sort of really want to just keep my trees healthy, or keep the trees healthy. And also, if you don't really need to prune them, then you don't really need to bother. But on this occasion, I'm going to prune some of these trees. So I'm just going round and I'm just removing some of the longer shoots. So what I'm looking for is a nice flat base, so that when I put it back in the pot, it's going to sit nice and flat, so that all of the areas, all the roots are going to be in contact with the soil. So, and I'm using root pruning scissors here, which I have to say, these are probably about the cheapest ones you can probably buy, but for root pruning, they do the job. And I wouldn't want to put an expensive pair of Japanese scissors into soil, because you're going to blunt them quite quickly. But it always is better to use the best tool that you can get for the job. So that's about half of it. We've already done almost, well, probably a few hundred trees already this year, so they're getting a little bit blunt, so I might have to sharpen these. But yeah, just to give you an idea. So there we are. We've now got our pruned and raked nabari ready for it to go back into its pot. So it's always a good opportunity to clean your pot. So I'll just give it a quick sweep around. If I had a tree that was diseased, I'd probably use a very weak solution of Jay's fluid, which is a antibacterial product that we can get in the UK, and that would just clean out any bugs that are in there. But this tree's very healthy. I can't see any indications of pests or anything like that, or any rot. So I don't think we need to do it on this occasion. So now we're just going to prep this pot. So this pot has 2 drainage holes in the bottom. So what we need to do to stop our medium from falling out the bottom is to actually place some mesh over those holes like that. So I'm just going to do that quickly. Again, different people do it different ways. I think that even if you can't see it, it's still nice to do things nice. So I quite like making twirly staples like this. And then I just use that staple to pop into the pot like that, and then fold over like that, and then that holds that mesh in there nice and tight. It's not going anywhere. Do the same again for this one. Just hold that in there with my finger whilst I turn it over, and then just lay those 2 flat. Okay. So now so when we put a tree in, what we want to do is make sure the tree is secure, so that when it gets blown around in the wind, it doesn't move too much and start ripping off all of the new roots that we'll be developing. So what we do is we just use a piece of wire to tie the tree into the pot. So now we have a fully prepped pot. So now we're going to have a look at mediums. So this is our standard deciduous bonsai mix that I'm using here. And you might be able to pick out here some of the aggregates that you were shown earlier on. So you've got akadama in here, which is this little granule there. You then also got volcanic rock there. And then the darker, smaller pieces you can see is the composted bark. So that's the three main principal ingredients that we use in our deciduous mix. If this was a pine, I would probably be using something that has even more drainage, so maybe adding some more akadama to it. But for a deciduous tree, our deciduous bonsai mix is perfect, so this is what I'm going to be using. So firstly we take our pot, and using our scoop, we've got metal ones on the nursery, but you could also use one of these little plastic ones, it doesn't matter. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a fine layer of soil at the bottom of the pot, nice and level. Now, because we started in the middle and we started teasing out here, there might be, and there quite likely will be, is a slight indentation in the base here. So what we're going to do is we're just going to slightly mound the soil in the middle, just so that we make sure that we get a really good contact with our tree. Now, this tree came to us like that, with its orientation as that as the front, but I personally think if we just turn it slightly, we get a slightly different view. So these little adjustments that you'll make yourself as you're repotting can make all the difference to the end result of your tree. So just because something came in a pot like that doesn't mean to say it's got to stay in a pot like that. You might suddenly think that maybe the back of the tree is your front, you know, so you can pick and choose, it's your choice. But on this occasion, I'm just going to put this back in the pot like this. I'm going to make sure I get a good contact by grinding it down. And I've just changed the orientation slightly. So instead of it being here, I've moved it round to here. So I've probably moved it through something like 20 degrees, just because I think that makes a nicer front. You may disagree. So what we're looking here is if we get down a little bit, you can see, now different people, you have to choose what height you want to sit your tree in the pot. Now different people like their trees at different heights. Some people like them sitting quite low. Some people like them sitting quite high up. I tend to probably favour the latter. So what I'm going to probably do is just put a little bit more soil in here, just to raise this tree up a little bit more. So again, this is another one of those aesthetics. One of those choices that you will make individually for your tree. So that looks better to me. Just probably only maybe a centimetre higher, but I think it just gives a slightly better view of the Nabari. Now this tree was also potted in the centre of its pot, but asymmetry is quite important in bonsai design, so you could move it to one side. And then you have to decide whether you think that actually improves the tree or not, you know, or whether you think it actually in the centre is actually the best way, or whether it needs to be this way. Similarly, you can tilt it more towards you or further away from you. So orientation of the tree is one of the great ways, simple ways in which you can really enhance your tree. So I quite often use the rule of thirds, something that you see in art and photography, or what's sometimes called the golden ratio, which is where you do tend to set things off centre. So just to show you, not necessarily because I think this actually looks better, because it might actually be better actually as it was, but just to show you that it can be done, I'm just going to set that one off slightly to one side. We then take our holding wire, you pull it as tight as you can and put a twist in it. And just put a few more twists in it. And then you can cut off your excess. And then just make sure that we've got all of the slack out of this wire. We can pull it, see there's all this extra slack that we wouldn't have got, and then we can tighten that down. And that's going to hold your tree in very, very firmly. It's not going anywhere. Okay, this wire can probably stay on for about 6 months. Once the tree is established in the pot, you actually want to take it off, because if you hold the tree down too much for too long, the roots then start to tend to grow up and out of the soil rather than down. So it's just really to help establish the tree. Okay. So there we have it. I think that looks quite nice. You may disagree, but it's all down to you. It's your tree. You set it up however you like. So now all I'm doing is backfilling with our chosen medium. So I've just put a reasonable sprinkle of soil around, and then again using our chopstick, we're just going to start working that soil in between the roots. Why do we do this? Some root systems will happily travel through air spaces, air pockets in the soil, but some won't. I don't know which ones are which, so I always err on the side of caution and make sure that I've got a good contact between my soil medium and my roots. That way you're always going to be right then. So just working that in. And you can normally feel when the aggregate is firming up. So that's feeling quite firm there, but here you can see there is actually quite a big hole here. You can see where all the soil's still falling down. So you're just going to keep working that soil in there until you get that sense of tension on the end of your chopstick. Just working your way around the pot. So one thing you do want to ensure when you've repotted your trees is that your finished soil level is really quite some way below the lip of the pot, you know, a good centimetre below. This is so that when you water your plant, the water doesn't just then shoot straight off the top. If the soil level was at exactly the same height as the pot like that, you'd water that and the water would run straight off. So make sure you do maintain a gutter. I'm not sure what the technical word is for that, but make sure you maintain that drop in the pot. And there we have it. So final job is just to clean up your pot. I'll probably pick the dirtiest rag in the place, so it's probably not going to come up very nice, but just tidy up your pot. You can sometimes get moss and lime scale on pots, and one of the ways that you can get rid of those is by using these little blocks, and you just basically lightly rub it across the area that you're looking to clean up. So you can probably see here. So this is a bit ground in dirt, so you can just rub it off and then wipe it off, and then that takes the pot back to its original glaze without scratching the glaze. Here we have the finished repotted tree. So just spin it around so that you can see. And there you have it, a repotted DeSoto maple. Personally, I would tend to steer away from styling a tree the same year that I've repotted a tree, particularly if I've done a lot of work on its roots. But again, that's a choice individuals make. Some people, they don't mind pruning and repotting in the same year. On the nursery, we quite regularly do it because we don't really have a lot of choice. But if you're talking about keeping your tree as healthy as possible, the real trick is to try and not stress it out more than you absolutely necessarily need to. So I think trimming the roots or trimming the crown of the tree in one season is probably enough. So hopefully there might be something in there that jogs the memory of the people that attended the course, or something that might be helpful for other people that are looking to repot their trees. So yeah, thanks for watching, and enjoy your repotting season.